We are here ready for round two. We've had a round one done of the Swiss now, and we are good to go. Sottle, how's it going? Looking forward to round two?
Yeah, can't wait. Just getting your teeth sunk into a nice Swiss is just a great feeling, right? We're at the early stages so far. People are just developing their scores going forward. And round two is when the pack starts to separate a little bit. You start to see the leaders being separated from the people who are in trouble. And an early 0-2 can actually spell death for your chances altogether. You have very little chance of making it through on tiebreakers.
Yeah, and we'll be keeping up, of course, with multiple matches going on. But the main match, we're really looking forward to on this one. It's going to be pretty much a storyline, or has been a storyline built up over the past week or so. And it is going to be that guy, the young savage himself, Amnesiasc. Are you looking forward to this one?
Yeah, cannot wait. Amnesiasc is a man that so far has achieved goals when he set them out for himself in Hearthstone. He's basically done what he said he's going to do. But he's had some big words coming into this tournament, and we'll see if he can back it up yet again.
Yeah, and we actually have some extra information and the player info on Amnesiasc himself. So just in case you're not aware of him, check this out.
I have a friend, he's a streamer, and one day he was just like, you know what? I think I'm gonna start calling Amnesia the Young Savage. And everyone else in our friend group was like, no, there's no way that's gonna stick. It kind of caught on in his channel a little bit, but it really became mainstream during BlizzCon last year.
In the zone, Young Savage is looking on point right now.
Yeah, he is definitely looking great.
That was where it really became mainstream and took off. And from there, it's kind of just become a second name, which I think is pretty cool.
Do you feel nervous at all?
It's time for Young Savage to carry the US flag.
Young Savage has never experienced fear in his life. My opponent should be intimidated either way, man, if you've seen me play. If they're going to be scared and like play differently, then that's perfect for me. That's just added percentage for me to win a match.
Amnesiasc, super confident, and so far that is paying off.
If you're playing live, it's bad to show emotion, so I never show any emotion when I play live. But I think you can be emotional about stuff, just don't let it affect your play, and you're fine. You can play Hearthstone angry, so long as you're not playing angry and taking unnecessary risks.
Amnesiasc with the plays to end the game right there.
I'm not afraid to speak my mind. I think it kind of adds a unique spin on who I am. I know how good of a player I am. I don't think that there's anyone better than me in this tournament.
Amnesiasc, definitely one of the stars of the Americas at this moment in time. Had a fantastic year last year, but didn't quite make it all the way. And obviously, you know, we were there. You heard us a couple of times in that video as well. We were there and we saw Amnesiasc go for it and fail just right, you know, towards the end. One of the last hurdles, and he was very disappointed. You know, do you think he's really, you know, built himself back up and ready to approach it again this time?
Well, listen to the way he talks about the game. This is a guy that doesn't talk in finite. He doesn't talk in winning and losing. You heard it right there. He talks in percentage. He says, that's extra percentage for me. And that's a phrase that I've heard him use over and over again. It's like, no, that play's bad. You lose percentage with that play. He understands we're playing an odds game. He thinks he's one of the very, very best players, and he thinks if he keeps showing up to these tournaments, he'll end up with more percentage than anyone else, and that gives him a great shot of making another strong run at the World Championship this year.
Yeah, and let's not forget about his opponent as well. You know, he is coming up against Crazy, and we've seen a lot of not so much upsets, but a lot of the popular names we know lose to some of the, you know, players that are really trying to work their way up through the ranks. So it's definitely not a guaranteed win or anything from Amnesiasc here, regardless of how good he is. And I'm really looking forward to it. What really stands out in the lineups for these players here?
Well, they're actually very, very similar. There is one thing that stands out particular is that it's Dragon Priest being played instead of the aggro rogue that Amnesiasc is running. Amnesiasc is running the most popular lineup in this tournament. Information correct before we got the Tavern Hero. That might have changed things. But he's playing the Muzzy lineup, the triple aggro plus tempo mage lineup. Crazylazy has taken that same lineup. He clearly doesn't trust that Muzzy rogue, though, because he's taken that out and he's replaced it with the Dragon Priest.
Yeah.
Both players have banned Shaman, no great surprise. Aggro Shaman, best deck in the game. It's been thrown to the wayside. The remaining 3 decks are going to face off.
Yeah, definitely reasonable about if you're not confident with the rogue as a fairly new list. that's knocking around at the moment. Definitely reasonable not to bring it. But without further ado, we are going to get in the first series we're going to broadcast from round 2, and it is going to be Amnesiasc versus Crazylazy, and it appears to be a Tempo Mage mirror to kick off the round.
It does indeed, and this is a matchup that I haven't really seen play out at a high level for a very long time. It was popular in the metagame for a while, but over the last few weeks, there hasn't been enough Tempo Mage to see mirrors play out. There's always been, maybe one guy's lineup has it, but we haven't seen the mirror happening. And speaking of a mirror, I think we are unfortunately looking in an exact mirror at the moment.
Yeah, I'm not really happy, going for the odds on them drawing exactly the same cards. So we will work on getting that fixed, of course. But looking at it, it looks like it appears to be Crazylazy's hand that's duplicated based off this. But, this matchup is going to be a little bit weird. I genuinely feel like in a lot of more aggressive matchups, it's who gets the board first. And the second someone falls behind a little bit, it can be a huge problem. But the slight difference in Tempo Mage is you have the ability to just kill your opponent with a high amount of damage spells.
Yes. Historically, this matchup evolved to a point where the player playing a little bit slower quite often came out on top. They would sit behind for a couple of turns and then look for a big swing turn, just a big tempo reversal, Flame Waker, Coin, Arcane Missiles, that kind of nonsense. Fireland's Portal, huge swing in the late game as well. So you actually aren't too worried about being behind for the first 3 or 4 turns maybe, with the caveat to that being what you mentioned, just don't take too much damage in that period because you don't want to fall into, say, Fireball, Frostbolt range in the late game.
Yeah, and we can see the hand from Amnesiasc now. We've sorted that out, so apologies about that, but we're good to go. And yeah, we just saw the Frostbolt go into the Amnesiasc's Mana Worm there to clear it up, and now it's kind of the awkward situation, and oh, this is okay, this is great. So the awkward situation I was going to say, where to just directly answer the Mana Worm, you would have to coin Forgotten Torch. And the problem is that's a lot of resources and a lot of potential tempo going forward when there's a Flame Waker, Coin, Arcane Missiles potentially later on.
So yeah, I think what Amnesiasc was setting up for that turn was the Flame Waker Arcane Missiles, as you said, to try and really counter the next minion that came down. That draw of the Acolyte from Crazylazy is such a clutch pickup. Amnesiasc now going to have to reevaluate his plan because, yeah, Flame Waker and an Arcane Missiles on a board that features an Acolyte of Pain is not going to be what he wants to be doing. So you can see him just diverge from the plan there. But we should see Crazylazy go with the Barnes this turn, more than likely, and then suddenly, if Amnesiasc picks up maybe one more cheap spell, we might see that big Flame Waker swing that we've been talking about. No! Does Crazylazy have the read here?
I mean, he just must have, right? A lot of the time you would just play Barnes just on curve because it can potentially be very powerful with the higher stuff, the higher value cards that are still left in the deck, but the Acolyte is just going to throw Amnesiasc into the same issue we had last turn for him.
I will say that Barnes in Tempo Mage, perhaps more than any other deck, is a card that you want to play with some excess mana available occasionally because, you can hit Antonidas, you can hit Flame Waker, you can hit these cards that give you beneficial effects, Sorcerer's Apprentice even, if you have additional mana to spend. So maybe that is Crazylazy's thinking here, and he's saying, hey, Amnesiasc, if you had to Forgotten Torch and Acolyte of Pain last turn, you're quite welcome to do that again this turn. I do not care.
Yeah, and this is, Amnesiasc's just going to have to suck it up here and just give Crazylazy some cards because not much else he can do. If he tries to do another turn that's like a slow stall turn, he might just lose to, at that point. That might be the turn that really makes Crazylazy run away with the game, and suddenly, look at the cards. Look at the amount of cards in Crazylazy's hand, and Water Elemental being the final draw of his turn means that he has the opportunity going forward for actually just dropping a huge minion onto the board.
Yeah, it does draw the Ragnaros though, which is by far his best outcome from the Barnes. He's not playing an Antonidas in his version of the deck. His curve ends at Ragnaros and skips all the way there from Azure Drake. So drawing the Rag does weaken his Barnes a little bit, but just the way he's curving out right now does mean he's gonna land nicely on that Rag on turn 8. Definitely establishing himself as the aggressor here and completely disrespecting the Flame Waker as well.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, I kind of talk about the Water Elemental in future tense, oh, he's going to drop it down maybe next turn and cause an issue whilst dealing with this Flame Waker with potentially Frostbolt Hero Power this turn, just to get it off the board, but yeah, he's just not bothered, and he might be a little bit punished by it because we can see that there was already a Fireball in hand, but now there's a Roaring Torch that if Amnesiasc really wants to go for it, for, really utilize his mana, he can actually just Roaring Torch and get off a ping this turn as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough decision here now, even for Amnesiasc. And you can see, even though there is the Flame Waker on board, life is a little bit awkward for him. This is just a very strange way this game is playing out. Crazylazy choosing to disrespect the Flame Waker, and then Amnesiasc choosing not to go for maximum Flame Waker value in response. But in terms of maximum value, Ragnaros from Barnes is not far off it.
I mean, Amnesiac's just like, if I use spells to clear up the water elemental, I can't develop more minions. And instead, he just decided to play Barnes, get Ragnaros, and potentially pick it off here. He does get the pings from the Flame Waker. He used it to just trade in there, and just Ragnaros banked for that 8 to face. And bear in mind, Barnes does not draw Ragnaros out of your deck and make it a 1-1. It creates a copy, so Ragnaros is still in Amnesiac's deck somewhere.
Yep, so now Crazylazy, perhaps some of the decisions he's made here, leaving the Flame Waker up, choosing to play for less tempo with the Acolyte of Pain earlier than going with the Barnes. Those little incremental decisions have now added up to the point where he's just fallen behind on board. Of course, Rag from Barnes has a big factor in that, let's make no bones about it. But now he's having to fight his way back onto the board. But this is exactly what I outlined before, this potential big swing turn that you can have. It's not a Flame Waker, but Sorcerer's Apprentice has the same effect. And no, chat, that's not draw last lull.
I was just about to chime in.
He needed to potentially react to the board after the missiles with an additional ping, which is why he left the mana open for himself.
Yeah, and now Amnesiasc has an awkward situation. Crazylazy has the board and, has a good amount of cards because of those early Acolyte plays. But Amnesiasc just has a hell of a lot of burn going on, so he needs to make a decision, and the decision looks like it's made. I've got a lot of damage in hand. I'm just going to go aggressive. He has the Violence Portal to get a minion from it as well, along with pings every turn. He could just kill Crazylazy before Crazy can actually get ahead on board and catch up with damage.
Yeah, if he has time to play the hand, then he just has lethal, unless there's some sort of wacky effect from one of the random cards, the Fireland Portal on the other side, for example. 5+ ping from the, 6+ ping from the Fireball is 7, and then the Firelands Portal will come down 5+ ping on the following, on turn 9 potentially. But he still has to get there. That takes him a long time because he's going into turn 7 and 8, so he can't even Portal plus ping on the second of his 2 turns that he's trying to burn through.
Yeah, and this pretty much displays a skill, pretty much every high-end Hearthstone player needs, is like recognizing what your hand does, right? You can think like, oh, well, maybe I'll draw minions and keep battling for the board. It's like, but you don't have minions. You have burn. You have to just go for it in these situations. Ragnaros could help out next turn, but that would mean Amnesiasc has to kind of like flip his plan around, play Firelands on the Barnes potentially, ping the Flame Waker next turn, and then drop Rag. But none of that really adds up. Maybe Fireball ping and then plan for Rag next turn. It's so awkward.
There's so many lines here, because he can Fireball face even to put him down to 7 to then set up a Rag lethal for the next turn. There's so many potential ways he can plan through this. He needs to consider what the maximum opportunity is. The Fireball is going face. He's saying to Crazylazy, you have played a lot of minions this turn. You at most are playing 1 minion this turn. That gives me a 1 in 3 of winning the game. And remember what I said, Amnesiasc, a man of percentages. He thinks he is in trouble this game. His highest percentage play is a 1 in 3 to win. He is going to take it.
Yeah, here we go. Enjoy this while you can, people, because Ragnaros is going on a trip to the Wild format very soon. And this is going to be huge. Where this Rag lands, it lands on Crazylazy's Rag. And that is not going to be enough. As we can see, there's multiple Fireballs. Doesn't even need to, but has them anyway. And he's going to end the game to go up 1-0 versus Amnesiasc. He must be feeling pretty great about this.
Oh, Crazylazy. Like, look at his seeding even. He came in at number 50, so he's only really kind of squeaked his way into those HCT rankings towards the bottom of the players that qualified, and coming up against the number 2 seed, one of the highest profile players in all of the Americas. That is going to be a big nerve settler for Crazylazy for sure.
Yeah, it always feels great as well to win a mirror match, because it's very, very difficult. You've just got to really try and find those edges, very small ones you can get where you can. But that did come down to a bit of a strange game overall, because Amnesiasc just in that spot where it's like, well, I only have burn. I guess I just try and kill him in a couple of turns and hope for the best. Obviously, the Ragnaros coming out helped him with that.
Yeah, it's just percentages. He looked at the board state and he said, okay, I can Firelands Portal some minions, I can Fireball a minion, I can continue to play for the board, I can drop Rag, try and take control. He knew that Rag coming down for lethal was a 33% shot. He thought the other line of play was less likely than that, so that's just where he went with his plan.
Yeah, we'll be moving on to game 2 once the players are ready as well. We can see the win there for Crazylazy on the mage. He has Priest and Warrior. His lineup just looks weird. It's like aggro plus Priest, whereas we're so used to seeing aggro plus Reno style decks.
Hey, listen, Dragon Priest is an aggro deck. It just can't kill you ever. That's the problem. Like, it curves out and
eventually.
Yeah, right. It curves out and takes the board like an aggro deck. It's just that once it gets the board, it kind of tickles you instead of punches you like the actual really aggressive decks do. So it makes sense to me as part of this lineup, but that aggro rogue that we've been seeing, the Muzzy Rogue, is one of the most popular decks in this tournament for a reason. It's been showing great results recently. So a little surprising to me that Crazylazy chooses to omit that one deck from the quad aggro lineup that we're seeing.
Yeah, I could imagine it's potentially just down to time and practice. Maybe he's just not had chance to play the deck too much, and maybe he just doesn't particularly like it. We might have a rogue hater on our hands, which is reasonable enough an excuse as any. We are going to get into game 2, though, as the players are now ready. Crazylazy 1-0 up versus Amnesiasc, and it is going to be the aggro rogue versus the pirate warrior. Highly aggressive matchup.
Yeah, massively aggressive, and this is where Rogue does need to pick up some of the early tempo tools. If the Rogue can get a good board grip early on, using some of those powerful tools they do have. Horse Rider is fine, not quite the optimal card to be having early with the likes of Backstab and so on in your deck, but still they need to get a grip on the board early and then they can snowball beyond belief against decks that aren't well equipped to answer their threats. So this is going to be, like most aggro matchups, just a pure battle for board control over the first 2 or 3 turns.
Yeah, and also something to note about this Rogue deck, if you're not too familiar with it, is that it plays double Shadow Step, this specific version. There are a few that cut one, but this one that Amnesiasc's playing plays double Shadow Step. You can do silly things with those cards because there is a form of burst you cannot really play around when Shadow Steps are involved.
Right.
And it's very difficult for the opponent. So we'll see how that comes into play. The Horse Rider I do like as it can potentially trade off with the smaller minions and stick to the board, which asks the Pirate Warrior question, like, do you have 1 damage or do you have a nice trade? And if you trade in, and the rogues already got value from that minion, that's when you start to get those edges in these aggro matchups.
Yeah, Shadow Step's an extremely interesting card in this deck because you look at it and on first sight you go, okay, you're just trying to Shadow Step Leroy and kill people with that, but it's actually an interesting value card at some time. When you get it in your hand, you can actually turn it into other cards by Shadow Stepping a Swashbuckler, hitting face with Shaku, Shadow Stepping Shaku, putting it back down in stealth, which will then turn into another card. So you actually have these interesting value decisions where Shadow Step can help turn one of those bad rogue hands that's just full of dead spells into other cards to potentially give you something to do.
Yeah, and we were discussing earlier, Amnesiasc is, a guy who just talks about percentages. He plays with the percentages, and he is 1-0 down though, so he's going to have to, really focus to get forward in this game. And we've actually got some words from him to see how he actually, in this position, how he approaches this.
I would tend to consider myself very in touch with what's going on in the single game I'm playing rather than in the matchup as a whole. I tend to think a lot more technically and linearly rather than in a broad theoretical sense, because I think you tend to miss something if you're just going for large overarching game plans rather than trying to micromanage each individual turn.
It's the kind of mindset you're going to need when you're 1-0 down in this kind of tricky matchup where if you slip once, I feel like the game can just run away with you.
How very British of you, Raven. 1-0. 1-0 down. Yeah. Shadow Step does come into the hand now, so it can potentially be paired with Horse Rider for repeated value, or somewhere down the line there is that Swashbuckler availability to him if he wants to go down that. But Orgrimmar Aspirant picked up, which I believe is Inspire +1 to your weapon, the effect of that card.
Yeah, it's going to be definitely a strange one to get use of. It's one of those like one-time use cards we'll probably see. If it drops turn 5, it just hero powers the once and then it'll just die. It does get the effect off. It does add a little bit extra damage though, a little bit extra punch to that dagger. So it might end up being the difference. Often in these matchups, 1 damage really is the difference.
Blood to Ica is a really nice tempo card to have in an aggro mirror though, so that is a huge pickup off the Undercity Huckster. From Crazylazy's side here, he's had the Fiery War Axe early, so he'll be happy with that, but the patches draw for Pirate Warrior, the worst deck you can draw patches with. They just get so little value out of it in any way. And now you see that Blood to Ica pairing with the Horse Rider. Such a huge tempo play. And Amnesiasc needs massive tempo plays like that to try and push past this Fiery War Axe, because as soon as Fiery War Axe is in play, one big tempo push isn't going to be good enough, because Fiery War Axe shuts it down straight away. And Crazylazy is showing no signs of letting this Fiery War Axe slow down, picking up the Blood Cell Cultist as well.
Yeah, Amnesiasc's going to want to draw into cards along the lines of Cold Blood, a second Viscerate, just to either be able to trade or try and actually just race, because it's very difficult now, as you said, with the War Axe. We can see that there's the Arcanite Reaper in hand as well, so much damage available. And, you know, Amnesiasc doesn't run any healing in the deck. One of the funny things that you can do, you know, sort of off what you mentioned earlier with Shadow Step, is you Shadow Step the Swashbuckler, and you just fill your hand with, like, just all sorts of crazy cards that your opponent can't really deal with, right? Because they don't know what they are. So we might see that come into play if Amnesiasc feels he needs an answer, but it is a bit of a long shot.
Yeah, I suspect this is potentially an aspirant hero power turn. I believe the way the sequencing works with Rogue is you get the dagger first, and then the Inspire effect goes off and buffs that initial dagger, so you will get a 2-attack weapon straight away, which can allow you to either double trade into the 3/4 Cultist, or take out the 3/2 at your discretion. The Tomb Pillager here just maybe seems a little bit weak, considering it's the majority of your turn, and there's a 4-attack War Axe up.
Oh, okay. So he's going for Swashbuckler. I wonder whether he was going to actually attack face with the Horse Rider, play Tomb Pillager, Shadow Step the Horse Rider, and just kill the Buccaneer and say, well, my guy's bigger than yours, basically, and so you have to try and catch him there.
He is going to go Pillager here, though. So by taking care of the 3/2, he's let this he's let the Argent Squire stick around, basically. There isn't a double value trade into the Squire anymore, but the Pillager coming down into this 4-attack War Axe is not a great feeling for Amnesiasc.
No, but not a great feeling for Crazylazy drawing a Fire War Axe as his next card. You know, he has got a turn of like leeway to a certain extent because he can equip the Reaper preemptively, which he pretty much is forced to do now. He would have much preferred some kind of minion to play this turn, then work into the weapons afterwards. So he's going to be very, very reliant on what he draws next turn, because if you look at the health, Crazylazy's on 18. Amnesiasc has not even been scratched at this point.
You see the 2/2 dagger coming out. Southsea Deckhand can now be played for charge value here as well, or he could coin the Taskmaster to protect the shield on his Argent Squire, but I think with the push he's making here, he might be looking to use that Taskmaster offensively for extra damage over the next couple of turns.
Yeah, and another not a great draw at all. Normally you're happy to see upgrade on a Reaper. It's like one of the best feelings to just make a giant weapon and crush your opponent, but it isn't going to help him with the trade, which he has to do. He's got to catch up in this health difference without minions at this point.
And I just saw in Amnesiasc's camera there, his eyes just went up and to the side as if he was trying to work something out, and that's a very weird looking play from Crazylazy, and I know Amnesiasc is huge on trying to make hand reads where he can, so I'm sure that little moment I caught in Amnesiasc's eyes in trying to work out exactly what those two cards could be in his opponent's hand. Would Leroy have been used to trade? Would Mortal Strike have been used to trade? These are all the questions he'll be asking himself in that position.
Yep, and Amnesiasc's just setting up a hell of a lot of damage on the board, just saying, okay, well, you can't trade with all of them, friend. Yes. And this is going to have to be an amazing draw, and it is definitely not an amazing draw. Another weapon.
Just what Crazylazy needed to tie that hand together. One more weapon brought it home quite nicely. So Amnesiasc, no time messing around. Accomplished player, whether he's ahead or behind, which means he's bringing it back to one player. 1 game to 1, sorry.
It is a 1 player versus 1 player
That
game,
is true,
correct?
yeah. It's factually accurate.
Yeah, it's really just you know, dropping the knowledge on some of those newer players. But we saw him then, and Amnesiasc actually just looked cool, calm, and collected. But we've got a couple of casters that are always cool, calm, collected. It's Lothar and Cora. How are you guys doing over there?
We pride ourselves on being cool, calm, and collected, so thank you for pointing that one out, Raven. Yeah, we have been actually watching a match between Zalay, who's on Luminosity Gaming, and Dr. Jikaninki, whose name is certainly a mouthful. And it was exactly a mirror of the match that you guys just saw with Amnesiasc. It was the Pirate Warrior versus the Aggro Rogue, and we have a really interesting turn. It is Zalay's turn 4.
And he had multiple things to think about here. As you can see, he doesn't have many options when it comes to active cards that he can play. It's only backstab and win. But what you have to think about is what is your turn 5? What is the entire matchup? What do you want to do this turn? And since you're the rogue, you're on the defense. You have to be defensive. You probably are looking to mitigate some damage in the upcoming turn. So you will have to sacrifice the backstab to play the Edwin with bigger stats. So in an example, you have an option to play backstab, play the Edwin for a 4/4 stats, and then attack with the Ardent Squire. The question is what do you attack as well. But then you lose the opportunity to backstab on turn 5 with Azure Drake, so it's a really tough turn to decide what to do.
Yeah, and he ended up going with the backstab Edwin, ran in the Argent Squire to pop the bubble, and had, unfortunately, not great results after that, but it is a very tough matchup for the Rogue. So we're going to go ahead and get back into Amnesiasc's game, move you back over to Raven and Sottle.
Thanks a lot, guys. Yeah, we are going to get into the next game. It's going to be, of course, the continuation of Amnesiasc versus Crazylazy. It is 1-1. Everything to play for at this point.
Absolutely. You can see from the graphic, the Mage has picked up a win with Crazylazy, Amnesiasc picking up a win with the Rogue. Conquest format, of course, meaning every player has to win with every deck. Shaman being banned from both sides, and everything on the line. And this really is a true underdog story coming up against one of the Titans. And Crazylazy has not looked overawed by the situation yet. He's been holding his own quite nicely.
Yeah, and it's you know, as we mentioned, just a really great name to take down if you're Crazylazy.
Oh, yeah.
As we saw last weekend, we'll be showing as the rounds go on, you know, players' records. And if you've got Amnesiasc on that defeated record, then you're going to be feeling pretty good about life at that moment. We are ready to go into the next game, though. Crazylazy versus Amnesiasc, and it is going to be the Priest versus the Mage.
Yeah, so really interested as to how this Dragon Priest does work out for Crazylazy here, because as we've mentioned several times, this is the big twist on his lineup compared to the other people who've gone with the mostly aggressive form of decks. And as I mentioned, Dragon Priest can curve out very aggressively. It can grip the board in the same way that those other decks do. It just doesn't have those teeth at the end of the game to be able to threaten damage.
What operatives for? Steal the damage from your opponent's deck. Sure. Might work out. Yeah, I do agree. I think the strength of the Priest in this matchup is a lot of the burn or you know, used as removal in the Mage deck doesn't really line up with how much health these minions can have.
It's true. There's a couple of fireballs and potential roaring torches that can do the magical 6 number, and 6 is a great number to be doing against Dragon Priest. Operatives, Twilight Guardians, all that good stuff. But yeah, sometimes even Firelands Portal, which we view as a really, really premium removal, can just fall a bit short because you're looking at it as the only real powerful card you have in your hand on turn 7, but you're looking down against a board that has a Draconid Operative on it, so it has no significant impact.
Early Nether Spite here, and some of the big boys. Just goes with a Crusher, though. Don't get to see Nozdormu.
Yeah, Matt Weibel will be disappointed.
Yeah.
He would have been rooting for that Nozdormu pick.
It wouldn't have been gold, it doesn't matter. True. Yeah, again, just the Nether Spite down is instead of, this is not really a matchup you're going to wait for Brand and try and get like huge value like you do in a control matchup, of course. You do just want to get something down to help, but even the 1 damage, the Priest doesn't really have a lot of ways to do that. But the 1, for example, to this Apprentice.
I like Amnesiasc here, setting himself up for a big potential tempo play if he wants it. Now picking up the missiles as well. The tempo play is huge. So several things happened here. Amnesiasc actually set off a soft check for Shadow Pain by playing the Apprentice. It may have been Shadow Pain if his opponent has it. It's not a hard check because they may have chosen to develop this 3-5, thought this was more powerful. And then if it stuck, if there was no Shadow Pain, or if Crazylazy chose not to use a Shadow Pain, he then has this big turn to come up with the additional effect of having a Flame Waker on board, which is the one card in your deck you want to protect from Shadow Pain.
Yeah, exactly. This is a great setup from Amnesiasc, just as he said. And also, this is not even all in. He has Barnes, you know, he has plenty more juice in the tank, so he can just keep going regardless of what happens. And when your opponent hero power passes after you've made a power turn play from Amnesiasc there, you are feeling pretty good. Let's see if Amnesiasc can get ragged in the end. Not gonna be ragged. Second Flame Waker though. Okay.
This is
just
going to get messy. That missile
I want to do it.
Does 7 damage to the face right now for 0 mana.
I'm okay with that.
I'm also fine with this.
So is Amnesiasc. Yeah. Get him.
And this 2-4 has not been answered, so you are almost confirmed there is no Shadow Pain in hand. This isn't like the previous matchup, the Mage Mirror, where we saw both players being a little bit cagey with their Barnes, because they didn't want a high-value card to come out and then just suddenly Ping gets rid of it. Priests can't ping. This 1-1 might as well just be another 2-4 at this point. The one caveat, a single copy of Holy Nova in Crazylazy's deck that he has not drawn.
Yeah, and I feel like he had to draw it that turn. We did see the Operative come out. but you know it's a bad day at work when you have a Ragnaros offered and an Arcane Missiles offered, and you take the missiles to try and survive as opposed to the Ragnaros that would be a potential late game, huge threat for Crazylazy. And Amnesiasc even has Azure Drake available as well, the card that gives Priest nightmares.
Yep, pretty much worked out perfectly there, got the perfect divide. It didn't really matter because he had the ping to follow it up anyway, and just look at all this damage being pushed through. Crazylazy picks up Blackwing Corruptor now, so he has that in combination with the Arcane Missiles. It's just not going to be enough to tidy up this board.
This Missiles isn't doing 7.
It's not.
That's the main issue here, I think. Crazylazy's just going to do what he can to try and hang on. Just get the ping on the Apprentice. It's not going to be enough. There's just so much available for Amnesiasc that it would have had to, just would have had to have needed a miracle here. And Crazylazy hits the concede button, and I did not mean to say Crazylazy. Look, that name is hard, okay?
I've been sat here this entire series saying, don't say Crazylazy, don't say Crazy, every single time.
Lazy.
I'm glad you got it out of the way, now we can move on. Crazylazy is not looking in good shape right now. Amnesiasc just crushing victory with the Tempo Mage.
Yeah, and it's one of the risks with Dragon Priest in general, right? It's one of those issues where if you draw very well and can drop those big minions on curve, if we saw a Twilight Guardian come down, for example, it would have been that much more difficult for Amnesiasc to just plow through it and carry on. But there was just no answers. There was no Shadow Word Pain. There was no Holy Nova. There was nothing. He just had the minions that hit things, and that's not what he needed.
And I just want to highlight 2 things about that matchup. Firstly, the early game sequencing from Amnesiasc, the Shadow Word Pain check and curving out into the Flame Waker. Secondly, the difference in how we saw Barnes used in that matchup from the Tempo Mage Mirror. In the Tempo Mage Mirror, they both tried to protect their Barnes, so if they got a big threat, they could get value out of it immediately. Amnesiasc here played his curve because he knew if he got a 1-1 Ragnaros or 1-1 Flame Waker, which is what happened, or any other big onboard effect, Priest can't just ping it and deal with it. So he was going to get so much value out of it if he got a good outcome. He did have a great outcome with that Flame Waker. The second one just ended the game.
Yeah, final nail in the coffin. Very impressive overall, and then Amnesiasc going, being 1-0 down at the beginning, going up so quickly, must be feeling great. It's just like, okay, just one more game and I got this. It's like we are getting ready to go into it. You see some of his resume here. Isn't that a bad one? I wouldn't mind this.
It's a fairly glowing resume, and it's made all the more impressive by the fact that he doesn't actually commit to Hearthstone 365 days a year. He really picks his moments to focus because he has other commitments with school and the sporting endeavors that he's involved in. So essentially, he comes into Hearthstone on a seasonal basis and kind of sets himself a target, almost without fail achieves that target, and then you'll just see him go dark for another couple of months as he focuses on other things again. So to build up a resume that impressive without, having a full-time 24/7 365 focus like many of these other players do, if Amnesiasc wants to go into this full-time, long-term, which I don't know if he does, he's a bright kid with a long future ahead of him, he's going to be one of the very best. If there's a Hearthstone Hall of Fame, that guy's going in it for sure.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, actually. It's just a very dangerous opponent, the fact that, even juggling everything, as you mentioned, and the fact that he can just approach the game in bursts.
Right.
And he was actually a coach for one of the biggest teams in America,
Yes.
a year or so, maybe a year and a half ago, when he was even younger, players came to him to coach them, and he was 15 or something. It's like, what? This guy's pretty much a prodigy. As you can see, we have got multiple matches going on across the board. We are playing the whole Swiss round out at the same time, and just picking out something quickly there. My pick Frozen is now 2-0 up in this second match, so I'm feeling pretty good about this one.
Yeah, Zalay looking in trouble, but your boy Frozen is taking your deck, the Finger Pirate Warrior.
Yeah.
Looks like he's piloting it to success still. You can see all the games that are going on, and Cora and Lothar are around as well, keeping an eye on all of those, giving you some updates later on. But here you see our main game yet again. Amnesiasc on the hill right now of a victory. Pirate Warrior Mirror coming up, and we were talking about this matchup earlier, saying that actually aggro mirrors are one of our favorite things to watch and one of our favorite things to commentate on.
Yeah, and we mean pure mirrors as well. So the same deck, the same class going up against each other. And yeah, I really do enjoy these matchups. We were watching the Aggro Shaman mirror earlier and discussing it. And the fact that they're just, the smallest of decisions really gets the biggest edges in these matchups. The game can swing very, very easily. And the only thing that disappoints me about this match is that there aren't enough Murlocs in it for my taste.
How many Murlocs is enough Murlocs, Raven?
Approximately 5.
You had to think about it. I saw the moment on your face. It's like, how many?
It's 6, right?
It's 6.
Finley, but 5 would be enough. Finley can take a break.
Well, there is at least one Murloc involved. There are slight differences in these lists. Amnesiasc is playing a little bit lighter on the burst damage. He's playing 1 Bash as his only kind of bypass taunt reach, whereas Crazylazy has still stuck with that 1 copy of Mortal Strike that we've seen, I think, Firebat and his opponent playing earlier on. But apart from that, fairly similar, of course. The South Sea Captain list, the more board-focused list, by far, overwhelmingly the most popular build of Pirate Warrior now.
Yeah, 100%. And the Bash versus the Mortal Strike is really interesting because although they both obviously have pros and cons, in this matchup, I do feel like the Bash is just better in general.
Yes.
It's cheaper for a start. The 3 damage kills a hell of a lot of the minions in this deck. And also the armor gain. You remove a minion and gain health, which is very difficult to do in this matchup, and a lot of it comes down to very, pinpoint health differences.
Yeah, there's some really big interactions in this matchup that can be, game-breaking for one side or the other. A 2-4 Frothing hitting the board and getting Corcroned, that's one of the ways that you can just lose. The other way is if you're going second and you get to Bash plus 2-drop against a Corcron your opponent has played. Yeah. That's usually game-ending as well, so the Bash definitely can have a huge impact.
Yeah, and this was a bit of a slow start for both players until this turn. The Crazylazy's managed to burst out a few pirates, and now the onus is just on Amnesiasc. He needs to remove this board and try and develop one of his own because, especially without the Warrior Hero power after he played Finley, he transferred the power over to Mage. It means that he has no, other than that Bash, no real way to gain health anymore, so any damage he takes is just permanent. It's like going up against a rogue.
And I love this play from Crazylazy, honestly, because one of the big problems, one of the big dilemmas about Patches mirrors, if you want to look at it that way, is the first player to drop a pirate, their Patches gets very little value. It just connects face with 1. You then give initiative to your opponent to then try and pick up value trades with their Patches when they bring it out. So Crazylazy actually held off and put a big 3-3 taunt in the way, protecting the 2 1-health minions that he dropped to try and get repeated damage or repeated value out.
Yeah, it's very funny in a lot of aggro matchups. The person who plays slower in terms of board development a lot of the time sometimes wins if they can make a bigger turn as opposed to playing 1 minion at a time on the board. Yeah. If you can just really push for that swing turn. Amnesiasc done a reasonable job though at clearing this up and just handing it back over to Crazylazy here.
Yeah, it's taken just about everything he had, though, because the Leroy sitting in hand is kind of a whiff at this point, going to be a dead card for a little while, but that Frothing pickup is massive, and that might be good enough just to encourage him to bypass the ping this turn and play for tempo instead. He could just max out on the double drops on board.
I like it. It has the benefit of there's still going to be a charge left on the weapon, so the book is actually still buffed, and I think this is like a huge turn from Amnesiasc here. This could be exactly what he needs to swing the game.
He's going to hold the Buccaneer, though, by the looks of things. Yeah, just a little bit afraid of dropping it into that Fiery War Axe, because this is a point I made a ton last week, which is when you are playing aggro mirrors, neither of you really has the right to go face, because you have to respect your opponent's aggression. And in those situations, it turns into a battle for resources. So not only does he want to keep the small-time Buccaneer in a hand as a resource, it's also an activator for this card exactly, the Bloodsail Cultist he picked up. Amnesiasc planning for all eventualities, planning for his percentages and getting rewarded when those percentages come out his way.
Yeah, and as well, because of the odds that whatever card he drew, he's going to be able to play with the Buccaneer means that you just naturally, even if that wasn't such a good combination to buff the weapon, you could naturally just play like Corcron alongside the book and just create a more, stronger board the following turn. And now Crazylazy, although ahead on damage, in terms of Amnesiasc being down to 15. Amnesiasc's like piecing together a pretty strong board himself, and the Leroy, which is definitely a hindrance early on, can actually become like, well, I know I have 6 damage in hand to potentially end this game.
Yeah, but from Crazylazy's side, he also knows that Amnesiasc has 15 health. The Warrior Hero power is gone. He has an Arcanite Reaper up. He has Heroic Strike in hand. That's 9 already. An offensive Sir Finley hero power could actually get an effective clock on Amnesiasc here.
Yeah, and now the draw for the Raider means that you can raid a Cultist and extend the life of the Arcanite Reaper to be a 6-2 weapon. So that's kind of huge.
The weapon that Amnesiasc has up right now, I believe, is 3 attack. It was originally Rusty Hook buffed twice by the 2 Blood Cell Cultists. So he's facing down 9, 12, 13 damage with the hero power, 19 damage with the Leroy. 7 mana available next turn to play both of them. So if Crazylazy does not address the board here or get a double value Finley hero power to affect the board twice or heal twice, he is actually just dead.
Yeah, and this is a very, very tough call to make from Crazylazy's point because it relies on what we were discussing earlier, hand reading as well. We know Leroy's been in hand forever. Crazylazy should probably know as well because that card has been in his hand from the opening and Amnesiasc has not played it on turns they've had much low impact turns here.
Yeah, we know that Leroy has been in hand forever. Crazylazy knows that card has been in hand forever, and by extension, you can visualize that card as Leroy.
It does get the rogue hero power. He did get the armor up though.
3, 6, 9, 12, 13 from the hero power, 19 from Leroy. Looks like Amnesiasc is going to be finishing out this game yet again. A perfect setup over the 2 turns just to find his out, finish the game. Looked like he was on the back foot from the amount of damage that he was taking, but he gripped the board and the young Savage is going to march on. This is a man on a quest and he shows no sign of slowing down just yet.
Yeah, and not a surprise at all. I mean, even just look at him now, he's like, yeah, I just won a match. It's fine. Like, cool, calm, collected, that's one. I have many more to play out today and, to move on and get into that top cut of the Swiss round. So, really good series overall. Crazylazy is not out of it yet. But, it was definitely a tough opponent to come up against, especially when you're ahead in that mirror match from game 1. And then every single game after that just felt almost hopeless at that point.
It really did, yeah. And that was a 1-0 game it started out. So Amnesiasc now going to 2-0, Crazylazy falling to 1-1. So Crazylazy now will descend into the pack, the shark pit of the middle of the Swiss where players are really starting to scrap to separate themselves. But Amnesiasc sitting pretty, only needs a few more wins now to really be odds on, percentages on to be taking a trip to the Bahamas.
Yeah, he's looking good so far, but we're going to check in with Cora and Lothar, see what